Imagine a quiet summer night in Los Angeles, 1969. The streets are calm, the lights dim, and families sleep peacefully in their homes. Then, in an instant, that calm is shattered by acts so shocking, so unthinkable, that they would haunt the nation for decades. How could a small group of young people, guided by a single leader, commit crimes so extreme that they became forever etched into American history? Tonight, we revisit the story of Charles Manson and the murders that still stir fascination and fear across generations. The Manson family was not just a group of followers. It was a tightly controlled cult, led by a man whose charisma masked a dark obsession. Charles Manson, a figure both mesmerizing and terrifying, drew in young men and women seeking belonging, purpose, or escape from their ordinary lives. Manson's philosophy was radical, violent, and extreme, revolving around ideas of chaos, rebellion, and social collapse. He convinced his followers that through their actions, they were participating in a larger mission, one that would trigger upheaval across society. The devotion of these individuals to Manson was absolute, and it was that devotion that would lead to one of the most notorious crime sprees in history. On the night of August 8, 1969, tragedy struck at Cielo Drive, where Sharon Tate, a rising Hollywood actress, and several friends lived. Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, acting under Manson's influence, carried out the attacks. Their actions were deliberate and terrifying, reflecting both the meticulous control of their leader and the willingness of the followers to obey without hesitation. Even in moments of apparent chaos, such as when they attempted to clean themselves at a nearby house using the homeowner's water, the sequence of events displayed both recklessness and cohesion. The attempt failed, and the perpetrators fled, leaving behind small but critical clues that would later aid investigators. The horror did not end with the Tate murders. The very next night, the violence continued with the killings of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. Manson himself took a more active role, reportedly instructing his followers on how to carry out the crimes. Leslie Van Houten and Steve Clem Grogan joined in, and the events mirrored the terror of the previous night. Each act seemed to escalate in both brutality and precision, leaving the community in fear and the police scrambling to piece together the motives and the identities of those responsible. Back at Spahn Ranch, the secluded home of the Manson family, tension and suspicion simmered. Charles Manson's paranoia was extreme, and those around him were not safe from his scrutiny. Shorty Shea, a ranch hand who had apparently crossed Manson or displeased him in some way, became a victim of the leader's enforcement. Manson, along with accomplices, took fatal action against Shea, demonstrating that disloyalty or perceived betrayal would not be tolerated. While the precise details of this killing remain partially unclear, it serves as a stark illustration of the danger inherent within the Manson circle, where fear and obedience ruled daily life. Investigators faced a complex challenge: the overlapping actions of multiple perpetrators, the influence of drugs, and the deliberate efforts of Manson to obscure the truth made the investigation difficult. Yet through careful collection of evidence, interviews, and the cooperation of some participants, authorities gradually reconstructed the events. Linda Kasabian, whose involvement was limited, became a crucial witness. Her testimony provided insight into Manson's manipulation and the extent to which followers acted under his control. Alongside forensic evidence and corroborating statements, a clearer picture began to emerge of how these crimes were orchestrated. One of the most striking elements of the Manson family story is the psychological manipulation exerted by their leader. Manson's ability to control and influence young individuals, convincing them to carry out extreme acts, has been the subject of extensive study. The ethical and social questions are profound. How much responsibility lies with the leader, and how much with the followers themselves? The case forces society to confront uncomfortable truths about human vulnerability, the power of ideology, and the lengths to which individuals can go when convinced they are part of a larger cause. The public reaction at the time was intense and immediate. There was widespread shock and profound empathy for the victims and their families. Fear and suspicion extended beyond the immediate perpetrators, touching on larger societal concerns about youth, counterculture, and the influence of drugs. At the same time, discussions emerged that recognized the complexity of the situation. Certain followers were clearly manipulated, coerced into actions they might not have undertaken independently. This nuanced view sparked debate over culpability, justice, and the ways society should understand acts committed under intense psychological influence. The trials that followed were long, complicated, and watched by the nation. Charles Manson, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten faced charges and eventual convictions for their roles in the murders. The courtroom became both a place for legal justice and a stage for public fascination. Manson's charisma and defiance, combined with the shocking nature of the crimes, drew immense attention, while the testimonies of witnesses like Kasabian helped to ensure that the truth of the events, as much as possible, was presented. Sentences of life imprisonment were handed down, and Manson remained in custody until his death. Yet the cultural imprint of his actions persists. Even decades later, certain aspects of the case remain unclear or disputed. Rumors and speculation have surrounded some of the more sensational claims about the murders, though most have been debunked. The exact circumstances of the killing of Shorty Shea are partially contested, and minor discrepancies exist in some accounts of the events. Nevertheless, the core narrative, Manson's manipulation, the violent acts of his followers, and the subsequent legal resolution, is well established. The persistence of questions and rumors reflects the case's complexity and its impact on collective memory. The Manson family murders have broader social and ethical implications. They highlight the dangers of charismatic authority and the susceptibility of individuals to psychological coercion. They raise questions about the limits of personal responsibility under extreme influence and the role of law enforcement in preventing such tragedies. The media's portrayal of the events, while often sensationalized, also contributed to shaping public understanding and cultural memory. For educators, criminologists, and the general public, the case remains a powerful example of both human vulnerability and the consequences of unbridled manipulation. At its core, the story is a reminder of the human cost of extreme ideology. The victims' lives were cut short and their families endured unimaginable suffering. Yet the Manson case also serves as a lens through which society can examine the interplay of psychology, culture, and morality. It challenges us to reflect on how individuals are influenced, how communities respond to violence, and how justice is both pursued and perceived. In studying these events, we are reminded of the importance of empathy, vigilance, and ethical reflection. The legacy of the Manson family murders endures, not only in the historical record, but in the cultural consciousness. It forces ongoing reflection on how society addresses charismatic manipulation, the susceptibility of youth, and the ethical obligations we have to each other. It also demonstrates the necessity of careful investigation, thorough legal processes, and the preservation of factual truth in the face of rumor and sensationalism. These lessons remain critical today as we continue to confront questions of influence, responsibility, and human behavior. As we look back on these events, we are left with difficult but essential questions. How can we protect vulnerable individuals from manipulation? How do we balance justice with understanding the psychological context of crimes? And perhaps most importantly, how do we honor the memory of those whose lives were tragically taken? The story of Charles Manson and his followers is more than a tale of crime. It is a study of human nature, influence, and the consequences of unchecked power. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can uncover more stories together. This content is compiled and analyzed based on publicly available information and open discussions.